Hi, I'm Shannon from houseimprovements.com, and today I'm going to show you how to mud a butt joint. So we've got some drywalled walls, and very common situation is where the ends of the sheets butt together. There's no bevel or tapered edge on them, so they're just flush to each other and flush to the rest of the surface of the wall. So what we want to do here is basically tape it first. And I'm going to show you a series of all the different steps in actually finishing this joint, but obviously you're going to want to let the joint dry, the mud dry in between every coat. So it won't appear that way on today's video, but we've just got some different butt joints all set up at different stages. So I've got my paper tape. I've got it torn or ripped off to the approximate length that I need. I've thinned my mud out a little wetter than I would normally use for coating. And I'm just gonna smear it right on that joint liberally. And by the way, just note how the butt joint is screwed. The screws are a little closer together, about every 16 inches, and one screw on every sheet. Just thought I'd point that out before I covered it all up. Did I say 16 inches? I meant 6 inches apart. My camera guy's telling me I just said 16, so I must have. Okay, so I put a nice liberal amount of mud on there. I want to take my paper tape and center it on that joint. Just lightly press it in with my fingertips. And now I'm just going to take the same knife. I'm using about a 3-inch knife. And I'm going to hold my tape with one finger and just squeeze out the excess at one end. Clean the two sides off. Now I can work my way down from there. It doesn't matter if you start at the top or bottom, whatever you're more comfortable with. So I'm just pushing the tape against the wall. I'm not using a lot of pressure, just enough to flatten it out and push some of the excess mud out. You don't want to squeeze it all out. I'm just kind of cleaning up as I go. Whoop. And the very last little bit here. I'm a little short from the floor, but the baseboard's going to come along and hide that anyway, so not a big deal. And I just want to make sure that I didn't leave any little ridges behind like this here, so that I don't have to deal with any chunks in my next coats that peel off when I hit them with the trowel. So, okay, so that's the first step. We're going to tape that. If you're using regular mud like this, like not a hot mud that dries quickly, just regular mud, just let that dry overnight or however long it takes, and then you'd move on to the next step, and we'll set up and show you that one. Okay, so here's a joint that's already taped. So it's had the tape on. Now what we're going to do is our next coat. For that coat I use a curved trowel. I don't know if the camera can see down there. You can see that this trowel basically goes like that. So what that does is I basically run one swipe center right over this, this tape, and it just builds up the center a little bit because we have no bevel here to try to hide this transition. So it just builds up a little thicker right over the tape, and then we feather it out from there. And to use this, I usually work with a hawk as well. It just is easier to manage. If you don't have one of these trowels, basically on this coat what you'd want to do is take your flat trowel, maybe about 8 inches wide, and just try to build this up to cover the tape. By build it up I don't mean throw 1/8 of an inch thick blob of mud over it, but a 1/16 to a 32nd or something like that. Anyways, just so it covers the tape up. Before I start, I'm just going to take my knife here. Anywhere where there is a little ridge of the dried mud or anything, just give it a quick little scrape. You don't need to sand it, or you shouldn't need to. Just kind of knock off any chunks that were there. I'm going to load up a little bit of this mud on my hawk. That's probably more than enough. And then I'll load up my hawk, and I'm just basically wiping it over this joint, like I said, and trying to leave it relatively smooth as well. So if you're using this trowel, I'm trying to load the center part of the trowel, and it'll just naturally work its way out to the edges as I work with it. So there's some there. I'll start down there. Okay, so we've just basically got it roughly on there. I cleaned my trowel off on the hock again, and I'm going to pull right across the whole thing once and just have a look at what I've got. You can see how it's covering really well down near the bottom. The tape starts to show here a little bit. That's pretty common. It's tough to get it all covered in one shot sometimes. I've got a few little air bubbles, so I'm just going to pull one more time. And I don't know if you could see the angle I really had on that. If this is my wall here at the back of the hock, I'm using the trowel on about that much of an angle. So I don't know what that is, maybe 15 degrees or something like that. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that. We're going to leave that, and we'll move on to the next coat. Okay, so now for our next coat. We're at our next spot here. And again, I just want to take my little putty knife here, chip off any little chunks that were left sticking high. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to load up some mud. Now this time I'm using a straight or a flat trowel. And at this point I'm just going to feather it out a little bit more. So this one here is straight down the length of it. And what I'm basically going to do is about half or 3/4 of a trowel width on each side of the joint. I can just see the joint is about right here. Okay, so I'm just trying to build it up a little bit and taper it out on the outside edges to nothing. So this time I'm going to load up one side of my trowel to do this side. Just kind of get that edge done. Now I'm going back to the other side of my trowel. Okay, so I just get some mud on there to work with. I get the hock out of here. Okay, so actually I'm going to need it anyways. So anyways, I've got the joint loaded up there. Now I want to work on tapering out to nothing on the two edges, but still leaving a bit of thickness up the middle. So I'm just doing that by how I position the pressure on my trowel. So if I'm out here, I'm obviously trying to push harder over here than I am in the center, and when I'm there, I'm doing the opposite. So I'm just kind of working the mud along, doing each side. So you can see I've made that patchwork wider as I've gone through each pass here. So we're just like that. I'm going to clean off that a little bit extra. I've got a little bit of a ridge there. Okay, so just like that. So that was that step. Now we have one more to get it completely finished out. We're going to move over there, and basically what I'm going to do there, I'm going to put one, I'm using the flat trowel again, I'm going to put one right centered over and do pretty much a full width out on each side of that as well. So we'll move over to that one and show you how to do it. Okay, so here we are for what should be our last coat, and like I said, I'm just feathering it out even more than what we've got here. So I'm going to run one up the middle, right about where the tape is, like that. And then I'm just loading kind of one side of my trowel again to get wider. Okay, so it looks a little goofy right now, but I'll end up stealing enough mud off of it as I work it out to fill in the gaps. So again, it's all about how you're getting the pressure of your trowel so that you can leave a buildup of mud here a little bit, but ending up with nothing out on the outer edges. Okay, so we should be pretty close there. Again, I'm using about that same angle, maybe 10-15 degrees of the trowel against the wall. And that's what you should end up with. So we ended up with, you know, a good 2.5 trowels wide. And if that still seems like quite a hump, maybe you've got a bit of a problem there, you can fan it out even wider. And so basically what this is doing, let me put this down. What we're doing by doing this is trying to eliminate, once you've painted, this joint flashing, which means basically the light reflecting on it shows a bit of a shadow or shows how much of a hump is here. So if we can build it out far enough, it makes that bump even more, a little more gradual, I guess would be the right wording, so that it's not as noticeable and doesn't show up as easy. Okay, so again, as in my other drywall videos or mudding videos that you've seen, you're trying to leave your coats as smooth as you can. One, to eliminate having to sand in between coating, and then finally also for your last coat, so that you don't have to do as much sanding if you don't have ridges and holes and everything else in there. So like I said, you know, build it out as far as you think you need to. Try not to build this up too much in the center. I mean, you got to build it up enough to hide the tape. That's what you're shooting for. Okay, and then just a light sand over that will get rid of anything, and you can see my sanding drywall video to cover that part. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed and learned from what I showed you here. This is my method of doing it. I'm not saying it's the only method out there, but this is how I would do it. If you like the video, click the little thumbs up icon there and give us the thumbs up. We appreciate that. And if you have any questions about this or anything else, you can go to our forum on the website at house-improvements.com, and there you can post up any questions you have or make a comment on somebody else's question even. And if you have an actual comment on this, you just want to say, hey, good job or whatever, you can post it down below here at YouTube too. So thanks a lot for watching, and hope you tune in and watch all the rest of our videos as well.